Joe Madison has been hosting a radio talk show for over 40 years. He's known by his listeners as the Black Eagle and can be heard daily on SiriusXM radio. A native of Dayton, Ohio, and a graduate of Washington University in St. Louis, Mr. Madison started his professional life as an activist. One of his first jobs was working for the NAACP and President Ben Hooks for 6 years as the political director of that organization. Joe Madison angered both allies and adversaries when he organized a boycott against Dearborn, Michigan, when that city prohibited non-residents, including African Americans from Detroit, from visiting its public parks. This story and many others are included in his memoir titled Radioactive. Joe Madison, why did you call the book Radioactive?
Well, because the platform of talk radio was so much a part of my activism. So I would use my talk radio platform to augment my activism. And so that's why in the book there are different things I was involved in, like freeing slaves in South Sudan, taking on the I'm laughing only because taking on the CIA over the whole crack cocaine issues. You know, we go a long way back, so you remember all of this.
Gary Webb.
And Gary, that's right, Gary Webb, because it was that story in the San Jose Mercury News that I had read, and one of my callers brought it to my attention. I immediately got in touch with Gary Webb, and I said, well, we've got to do something about this. I immediately got in touch with Dick Gregory, and Dick Gregory said he was out of town, and he said, don't say anything, don't do anything. I'm coming back to D.C. and we'll get on this. And I was able to use my talk show as a platform to bring this issue, Gary Webb's story, to the attention of the country.
People want to hear you today. Where do they go? How long are you on?
4 hours, 6 a.m. East to 10 a.m., SiriusXM, and it's what we call the Urban View channel. And that's where we are. And then of course they replay it, and now I'm trying to figure out all this because I'm just old school. Now we have to do a podcast, and what they do, they just take excerpts from the show and turn it into a podcast. I've got a pretty smart crew of people, young people who know how to do that.
Where were you born?
Dayton, Ohio.
How long did you live there?
I was born there, reared there, left to go to college. Started off at Wisconsin State University. Went there to play football. Got kicked off the team because I was involved in student activities for black students who are trying to get a African American curriculum, but I was there, and actually I'd write about it. Was captain of an undefeated football team, thinking that my freshman year, getting ready to go back to play varsity the next year.
What position?
At the time, I was a middle linebacker. I got a letter from the varsity football coach, middle of summer, and I mean, he put this in writing: do not report to camp. We don't want you. And matter of fact, we don't want your kind. And my whole, I mean, it was like, it was like my whole life just stopped, because this was my out. This was how I got to college. Didn't know what to do. Spent a year working actually in a factory outside of Dayton, And then my high school football coach got a call from a coach at a school I hadn't even heard of, Washington University in St. Louis. And they were rebuilding their team. And we had heard what had happened, and we'd like to recruit you to come up here.
What did that earlier coach mean by your kind?
See, you got to realize this was '68, so a lot of African American students all over the country were trying to get African American history and professors hired. There was and I bet you C-SPAN has it somewhere in their archives. What was it? The Wyoming 16, I think they called it. These are African American football players, a Division I, that were playing for Wyoming. Same situation on campus. Black students wanted African American history curriculum professors. The ball players, because they were high profile, were asked to join the movement, to join the student movement. And they had agreed that they would wear black armbands. And the coach called them all in. This is a fascinating story. Called them all in, and not inside, out in the stadium. Had all 16 of them sitting in the stadium, and told them that if they wore those armbands, that they would be kicked off the team. And he kicked all 16 of them off the team. And this was going on all over the country. And that's what that coach, my coach then at the time, that's what he meant. I don't want my ball players, especially my black ball player, involved in this student movement. I mean, he clearly was obviously he just a very conservative. And you got to remember, this was Dr. King had been killed. I mean, at that point, no, he hadn't been killed, but the civil rights movement was in its heyday. And but I ended up at Washington University, and ended up being captain of that team. Ended up my senior year with a championship, and got one of the best educations that I would never have been able to afford if it had not been for that coach and my high school coach, that college coach, and that university, reaching out. I literally say in the book, and the university, some of the folks at the university don't quite get it, but I literally said, they saved my life, because I don't even know what I would have done. I really didn't know what I thought I had really messed up.
Go back to Dayton.
Yeah.
Your parents, what were they like?
Well, now this is, you know the story. I was reared by grandparents, and I write in the book how, and I only know this story through what my grandmother told me, was that my grandfather showed up at the house. I was 2 years old, as she told the story. My sister was 1, and my mother was not there and had abandoned us. And my grandfather came in, found me and my sister, and in essence became our legal guardian. So my grandfather and grandmother reared me till I actually graduated from high school. Now I wasn't estranged from my mother. I mean, she would show up every now and then I'd go live with her, and of all places, in Indianapolis, Indiana. And my father, Felix Madison, he lived in Flint, Michigan, and he worked in the Buick plant, foundry in the Buick plant. And I'd go up to Flint some summers and stay with him. the grandparents were in essence the people who reared me, and then of course, as you know, our good friend Professor Skip Gates came to me and said, we want to do your family tree for our PBS segment, Finding Your Roots. And I said, sure. And it took so long, Brian. I mean, it was like, because he used to hide from me when he'd see me in the train station when we were commuting, when we were going back and forth to New York, and because he knew I would ask him, when are we going to get this done? And so finally, I get this call from Skip. It was a Saturday morning. He said, Joe, we're finally finished. It's been 5 years, I know, but we're finally finished. But I have to ask you, I've got good news and bad news. And I said, okay, what's the good news was we're finished. The bad news is your Felix Madison is not your biological father. And, I hesitated. I said, what? Now, again, this is just, a couple of years ago. I mean, I'm in the middle of writing the book. I'm writing the book. We're about ready to close it out. He's not your biological father. I said, what are you talking about? He said, no, he's not. Well, how do you know that? Well, not only isn't he your biological father, but you've got two half-brothers. One of them lives in Los Angeles, where my wife and I are. She's from Los Angeles. Found out he lived not too far from where my wife lived, and so this is 2000 after. I said, is he still alive? No, he has passed away. Is the half-brother? Yeah, the half-brother is there. And what about the other half-brother? Well, the other half-brother, Brian, grew up with you in Dayton, Ohio. You guys went, he said, I found this out later. He is the middle brother. I'm the oldest. The LA brother is the youngest. And you guys, we found out we went to the same elementary school. We went to the same high school. We had the same running buddies in Dayton. He knew of me because I played ball. I had a little rep. And he said, oh, yeah, we knew Joe Madison. Da, da, da. Never knew we were related. And so it wasn't, I'm going, wow. So they brought us together. PBS brought us together, brought the three brothers together for the first time just a few years ago. And and again, it was like, man, it's like he was the younger brother was happy because he thought he was the only son, and the middle kid, the middle brother, he was really thrilled because he wanted brothers, and it was during the taping. We ended up spending more time talking about the guys we ran in the street with than we talked about the father. The younger brother, Kip, is from Los Angeles. He knew the father. I never knew him. And there's a photograph of him in the book. And the middle brother, he knew him. He knew him, but didn't know he was his father. Didn't know he was his father.
Where did you decide or learn to be an activist?
Well, obviously when I was at Wisconsin State.
Right, I mean, then that was it.
Oh, that because again, you got caught up in it. I mean, because there are only 100+ African Americans on campus, so you got caught up in it, and so that's where it really started. Then while I was a freshman. I had to go back to Wisconsin to get my grades up to transfer to Washington U. I was not a very good student my freshman year. in Washington, you said, well, if you can get your grades up, we can get you here. We can get you a scholarship. We can get you this and get you that. And in the process, I met Julian Bond. Actually had when he was nominated to be, what was it, vice president, I think?
Yeah.
He was on a speaking tour.
That's 68?
Yeah, 1968. He was on a speaking tour. And I was asked to introduce him on the campus. And we became just a lifelong friendship at that moment. Matter of fact, Julian, I introduced him, and my first time meeting, can you imagine, here you are, a sophomore, you're all of 19, and you meet Julian Bond. And then Julian said, well, I'm on a speaking tour for, at the time he was the anti-war candidate. He was campaigning for him. And
was he campaigning for McGovern?
No, not McGovern. Oh, God.
McCarthy?
Yes.
Jim McCarthy?
Yes. And he said, I'm on a speaking tour here in Wisconsin. I've got 4 or 5 speeches at these different state colleges. How'd you like to fly with me? I mean, they've got a private plane. I'm flying around. And I said, yeah, I got to get permission to get out of class. I would have gone anyway, but they gave me permission to go. And he and I spent 2-3 days. My one experience with Julian Bond was after he gave a speech at the school, a friend of mine loaned me his Corvette to drive Julian Bond to the Playboy Club in Lake George. And I had forgotten that. And it was just a year ago, that young man, we were in school together, he said, you know I loaned you my Corvette to drive Julian up to the Playboy Club. I said, no, I don't remember that. And he sent me a photograph of the Corvette. And then there was Claude Brown. There was the book, Man, Child in the Promised Land. He came to campus, and he stayed in my dormitory room with me. And we stayed up all night talking, all night long. And so that's how it, and then of course King was assassinated, and then so then it just, and then that's where it really started.
What do black people say to one another when there are no white people around?
I don't know. I'd like to ask white people what they say to each other when there are no black folk around. I mean, that's, no one has ever asked me that question. What do we say? I mean, it's such an open-ended question. What do we say? We talk about our families, our funerals. I mean, if you put a parenthesis around it, when we're talking about civil rights, when we're talking about how crazy, I mean, this day and age, I'll be honest with you, and black folk aren't even worried about whether white folks are around now. I can tell you from my show, they think these Trumpers and MAGA folks, they're crazy. They think they're crazy. And I got to tell you, I don't care. And I know people who, in all walks of life, Brian. I know folks who have no D's behind their names, and I know doctors and PhDs, people in all walks of life. I've interviewed the President of the United States. I know members of Congress. And I can tell you without fear of contradiction that no matter who they are, whenever there's a conversation, the phrase that comes up is some white folks, and this is not generalizing, they're crazy. They're going crazy. What the hell is wrong with them? What's going on? And that's what they say. But but once again, that's in the open. That's in the open. There's really no fear like it was when we were coming up. There's no fear. People speak their minds. But, you know, I think in large part because we have shows like the one I do. You know, I mean, I've got about 6 million listeners, and they pick up that phone and they don't care who's listening.
In the history of media,
Yeah.
where do you fit for black audiences? How important is your radio show, and how many were there before you started your radio show where you had a black host?
Yeah, let me tell you, there was always, when talk radio first started, or there's always been talk radio, but as the format we know now, there were always one black host. One black host. Like when I first got into the business, I was working for the NAACP, living in Detroit.
What were you doing for them?
I started off young, 24-year-old executive director of the Detroit branch, 10,000 members, largest branch in the association. Then, after 3 years there, I ended up, Ben Hooks came on as the CEO, and he recruited me to be the political director. The way I got started in talk radio was there was one black host who was on weekends. You know, I think he did a Sunday show. He was leaving. And I had been a guest because of the NAACP work, Brian. And the program director, Michael Packer was his name, came to me and said, how would you like to take his place and do a talk show? It's weekends. You don't get paid hardly anything. I mean, probably $50 an hour, a segment or whatever show. And I said, sure, but you know, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go to broadcasting school. Remember in those days they had broadcasting school?
Columbia Broadcasting
That
School.
was one, and then there was another one, and he said, hell no. We'll teach you everything you need to know, because if you go to that broadcasting school, we're going to have to undo everything they taught you. And that's what he said to me, and so it was really a baptism of fire. So I just got in, and there was a conservative, libertarian talk personality who sort of took me under his wings. And we probably politically we were miles apart, but we were friends. And he taught me what was known as formatics. This is how you do, this is how you go in and out, this is how you, and then there was Larry King, who I would usually go on his show because of my activism. And Larry King taught me a lesson I practice to this day, and you do it too. He always said, the best question is always based on the last answer. And I always, because I would go in like a lot of people, have a prepared list. He said, no, it's based on the last answer. And that's how I got in it. So I did that for 10 years. At it started out the famous WXYZ. Detroit. Remember that was the station of Soupy Sales.
WJR is another one.
Oh yeah, that was WJR. They didn't have a single black person. Can you imagine having a talk station in Detroit, not having one single? And maybe they had a weekend person. Maybe, I don't remember. And then it became WXYT. I finally got my first full-time break, my gig, at WWDB FM in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Because they're only black, and he and I became very good friends. He was leaving. And so they recruited me to come to Philadelphia, and I did midnights to 5:30 in the morning. And so it was like within the first 90 days, I'm called in to the owners, and I write about this in the book. I moved my family from Detroit, where I had a really solid political base. And so this was a gamble. Kids out of school, wife had to change her job. And I get called into the general manager's and owner's office and told, well, you are talking about black folk too much. We're getting letters. This is before tweets, social media. And so we'd rather you not spend so much time talking about black people. And I'm the only black person in the lineup. And now I'm still very much an activist, because we haven't talked about in Detroit with Dearborn and Rosa Parks and all that. So these folks knew who I was. They knew me. And I was just pissed. So I decided, okay, screw y'all. And I arranged an interview with my good friend Ron Brown, who was at that time running to be the first African-American chairman of the DNC. And I had known him from his days with the Urban League. We were young activists together. So I interviewed him 1 hour, and then the next hour, I interviewed Louis Farrakhan. I don't think 24 hours went by, and I was called in the office and fired. Now, they didn't fire me because and the reason I interviewed the two of them, I wanted to show the dichotomy. Here was Ron Brown, and then here was this Louis Farrakhan. Now, remember, this was after MOVE. This was after Philadelphia, where the entire neighborhood was burned down. And but their excuse was, we know you've been going on weekends back to Detroit to do your weekend show on WXYT, and we want you to stay in Philadelphia on weekends. To get to know the city, and I said, but it's weekends, it's my time. Well, it's a conflict of interest. The signals don't even cross. One is in Detroit, and the other's in Philadelphia. These folks don't even know that the stations exist. And that was the excuse they gave, and they fired me. So for a year, I had no job. I was not working. And I would end up I would audition for different stations. Now remember, there was no Urban View. There was no
on SiriusXM.
Oh, there was no Sirius. There was no satellite radio. So I'm going pretty much to conservative, right-wing stations, and usually it was because they were looking for a black. But and so I'd be in Cincinnati, and I'd go there, and that it worked out because I did Geraldo Rivera had a show on ABC. It was a talk show, and I was invited to be on his show to talk about talk radio. And it got into a discussion about WABC. WABC didn't have a single black person, this is New York now, on their airways, in their lineup. And in the audience was the program director for WWRC, Ken Milgren. And he was in the audience. And he, after the show, he contacted me and said, well, look, if they don't want you in Philadelphia, now a year had already gone by, then we want you in Washington, D.C. And would you be willing to move to Washington, D.C.? So, and do I uproot my family? Do I take another chance at this? So for about a year or more, I commuted every day from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C.
Car or train?
All of the above.
Car, train, and bus.
Car, train, plane, and bus. All of the above, because I had 2 young kids. So I'd go up, do my shift, in Washington, drive back, catch a train back, so that I would be home for my kids in the evening, baseball practice, whatever, and then up in the morning, get in the car, drive to Washington to do my show.
Before or after the Fly Jock, Tom Joyner?
Oh, this was during all that time. Tom Joyner was the iconic. Tom Joyner was our hero,
Well, just for a second, tell the Tom Joyner.
Well, the Tom Joyner story. He was the Fly Jock, where he literally flew. He was based in Chicago. That's where he started. Had a show in Dallas.
Dallas, yeah.
And every day, he would, after his show, he would get on an American Airlines flight and fly to Dallas to do his Dallas show.
In the afternoon.
In the afternoon. And it's interesting. I guess after he had stopped doing that, American Airlines gave him his seat. That he did. But can you imagine the mileage?
No.
Or how he did it?
No.
But he was Tom Joyner, and everybody. I mean, Tom is a very, very close friend. Not doing well, I understand, but he, the Fly Jock, and so but you did what you had to do, and God, man, it was. Now that I look back on it, it was just, to this day, I'll be honest with you, if I saw the program director and the owner of WD. They've since sold the station. I mean, I don't even know if they're still in radio. I'd have a hard time forgiving them. I mean, they just...
The ones in Philadelphia.
The Philadelphia. Yeah. That was such an absurd... But then, before I went to Washington at WRC, good people, but I was there for a long time, as you know. I think that's how we met and got involved with you guys in C-SPAN. But I told the general manager, again, they had one black person, Bev Smith, just a brilliant broadcaster, one of the few African-American women.
Was that the same Bev Smith that went in the restaurant business?
No, no. This was Bev Smith was out of Pittsburgh.
I remember Bernie McCain.
And Bernie McCain was the person I replaced in Philadelphia. Bernie McCain was commuting from Baltimore to do the midnight to 5:30 in Philadelphia. Well, he got tired of that, left and went to Radio 1. I replaced Bernie McCain. And then, of course, Bernie McCain and I ended up working together for Kathy Hughes in Radio 1. But I told the folks here in Washington, now, if you're recruiting me to come to WRC, I'm not going to come and replace Bev Smith. You got more than one white guy. So don't get in, I'm not buying into this, I'm going to be the replacement for her. And I think that caught them by surprise.
Let's go to your personal life. Married twice.
Yes.
First wife,
Donella Crawford, yeah.
How long were you married to her?
We were married about, 4 or 5 years.
How many children from her?
One daughter, Shauna, who is, by the way, I was with her just recently. She's a broadcaster.
Well, you talk about her a lot in your book.
Oh, yeah. Shauna, when I started doing talk radio, Shauna used to screen my caller. Shauna, when she was 12 years old. Her mother, Donnell, was a Northwestern graduate from the journalism
school.
Yeah, but we dated through most of high school and that type of thing. And Shauna is a magnificent broadcaster. I mean, she obviously she got her smarts from her mother, but not me.
Where is she?
Shauna?
Yeah, where does she broadcast?
She's at the
Voice of America.
Voice of America, excuse me. Just had a brain lock. But she's at Voice of America, and she does for English-speaking countries.
Go back to how could she screen the calls at age 12?
Because she's smart. She's smart. She could screen calls. She could literally. She knew. First of all, she knew the script, and and she would screen the calls. Calls would come in, and she did that. Almost the whole time I was at WXY, the T. She's just smart. She just had her mother's intelligence, and
Second marriage
is now 40. What are we? 45 years. 45. Sharon Moore.
You call her Sherry?
Sherry. Yeah. She's my executive producer.
How does that work? I mean,
being my executive producer.
I mean, husband and wife working together sometimes.
Well, first of all, and here's how it works. One, she was doing it anyway, because we were the kind of couple where we know a lot of the same people. We would talk politics. She reads. She watches C-SPAN. She watches the news. She was former flight attendant. She also trained flight attendants. She was in management at United. I think she retired from United Airlines, but then she just was doing the job anyway. I had to get special permission from SiriusXM. Can I hire her to be the executive producer? And SiriusXM said, "Oh, definitely, no problem with that at all." So she is, in essence, she manages. We have another young producer, Sam Nassau, who's was at the local NBC station here. We hired him, brilliant young man. And so the two of them work closely together. We have an engineer, Denzel Green Jr., who I've been with him over I guess it's been over 12 years, because he was my engineer, my technician.
Sitting here, you're a mild-mannered, easy to talk to person that when you're on your show from time to time,
we let it loose.
Now, but tell me why.
It's I don't know why. Yes, I do. I learned something, and I'm not name dropping, but growing up in Detroit, I got to know a lot of entertainers and who listened to the show. And
who were some of the biggest?
Oh, Aretha Franklin would listen every day. Rosa Parks would listen every day. The Four Tops, Smokey Robbins. I mean, Lim Barney. I mean, Dave Bing, who became mayor. I mean, these were, my running buddies. These were guys and folks we just would talk, because we all were sort of in the entertainment business.
Okay, before we go on, what was Aretha Franklin like?
Oh, Aretha Franklin was a committed civil rights activist who was very supportive, but I knew her father before I knew her, Reverend C.L. Franklin, because he was the iconic civil rights pastor. Before there was a Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, there was C.L. Franklin. And when
they did a documentary when he was there.
Yeah, they've done several. But when I first came to Detroit, and I became the executive director of the NAACP, man, he called me into his office and sat me down and said, "Young man, let me tell you about these people." And I'm serious. And let me tell you, this person you can't trust, that person you can't trust, this person's okay, and it was like, that was the baptism of fire.
What about Rosa Parks?
Rosa Parks, I met Rosa Parks, going to John Conyers' office for some issue. I walk in the door, and she's the receptionist. And I look over and I said, "That's Rosa Parks." And she listened to the show. Mr. Madison, because she always said Mr. Madison. I listened to your show. I really like you and da da da. Very quiet. We never got in any long conversation. And in the book, I talk about how we got together and boycotted the city of Dearborn.
Tell the story.
Oh God,
By the way, Dearborn's how far from Detroit?
as far as we are from each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, across the street.
Yep.
You know, it's across the street. Now, this is when Dearborn was Henry Ford's headquarters of Ford Motor Company, less than 1% African American, what we would refer to in those days as a sunset town, Don and Sunset Town. If you were white, if you were black, you had to be out by sunset or couldn't go in before.
Was that legal?
No, nothing. And see, in the North, we didn't have this codified stuff. This was what would they say? The lawyers would say this was de facto.
Well, you just had to leave because you'd be in trouble there?
Oh, you would be stopped by police. What are you doing here? You know, you're black. What are you doing in town? And you'd be pulled over. And this was the history of Dearborn.
Did this happen to you personally?
No, it never happened to me. I never went to Dearborn for anything except to go to their shopping mall. They had this huge regional shopping mall, and black folks flowed into that shopping mall, Brian. And so what happened was a black family went across the street to the city park and apparently was in a picnic area, picnic shelter. A family from Dearborn, a white family from Dearborn, told them they couldn't use it because they weren't residents of Dearborn. Now, how did they know that? Because they were black. And in essence, so that white family went to the city council, went to the mayor, got an ordinance passed that said if you are not a resident of Dearborn, you could not use their city parks. Well, it got into the newspapers. And I walk in, so I'm going to John Conyers' office. There was a friend, Art Featherstone, who was an aide to John Conyers, and he was a rabble-rouser. And he was from Sunflower, Mississippi. And he said, Madison, we got to do something about this. And Rosa Parks sitting there very quietly listening. We got to do something. We can't let this stand. What do you want to do? We got to boycott Dearborn. Oh, okay. So, I'm thinking, okay, well, let's do it. And then Mrs. Parks said, I'll help you. Oh, Rosa Parks, well, fine, let's go for it. And so it was just the two of us. And three of us, Art Featherstone, Rosa Parks, and myself. And so we decided to announce that we're going to boycott all businesses in the city of Dearborn. If we can't play in your parks, we're not going to pay in your stores. So we arranged to announce the boycott on Thanksgiving Day, because it's a slow news day. And next day, it's in the newspapers. There was a spontaneous response. And folks, and remember now, the next day was shopping. This is like, what do they call it?
Black Friday.
Black Friday. And folks just, okay, fine, we're not going. Henry Ford picked up the phone and called.
This is Henry Ford II? Henry Ford II. The second?
Yeah, Henry Ford. I don't know him, didn't know him, never met him. And he called Coleman Young, who was mayor.
Black mayor.
First black mayor. And he called, and they started, and he must have called every older black leader he knew. Now, once again, I'm in my 20s, all hell broke loose. And I was pressured to call off the boycott. I wouldn't do it. And I tell the story of called into a Saturday morning breakfast meeting, which was sort of like, I call it today a kitchen cabinet for Coleman Young. there was a federal, and I'm not mentioning names because these guys are all gone now and they can't defend themselves, but they couldn't deny it. And there was a federal judge. There was like the former superintendent of the public schools, a major labor leader, vice president of the UAW, and all these folks later became admirers of mine, and Coleman Young. And they would meet, and it was, I always remember, they'd have scrambled eggs and bourbon. And these are older guys, and leaders, been through hell. And they said, you will call off this boycott. No, I'm not. No, you will call it off. You got Henry Ford calling all of us. And then Coleman Young said, you didn't get my permission to call a boycott. And I said, Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, I don't need your permission to call a boycott. And he looked me in the eye and he said, young man, you need my permission to fart in this city. Whoa. Okay, that's how it got to the point, man. I was called into that, and to this day, I will always be thankful. They called Ben Hooks. He was CEO of the NAACP. So we had another meeting, and I can see it today. It was at this church, Hartford Avenue Baptist Church, and it was the church of the local president. Because remember, I was a political director, but I was based in Detroit. And almost the same, there was a different group of people. And they had this, here were the pews. It was no one in the church but a group of us, probably 5 or 6 folk. And Ben Hooks and I walk in together. Ben, we want him out of town. I don't care where you take him, but we want you move him to New York, but get him out of town. We want him out of town. Now, what's this all about? It's this boycott. He won't call it off. I said, you can't call it off. It's already started. And Ben listened and listened, and he said, no, gentlemen, he didn't gentlemen, but guys, let me tell you something. And this is bare knuckle. When you talk about when you ask the question, what do black folk talk about when white folks aren't around? They curse each other out. And he said, now let me say something to you guys. I've been in boycotts and with King and the likes, and I know one thing, that successful boycotts are either well organized or they're spontaneous. I know this wasn't well organized because y'all didn't help him. This was spontaneous, and I'm not taking him anywhere. Joe, come on. We're leaving. And we got up, walked out.
How much did Rosa Parks know how important she was to the civil rights issue?
I don't know. Look.
I mean, how did she carry herself?
Rosa Parks carried herself with grace. She was quiet, very supportive. In the book, when I decided to run for president of the Detroit NAACP, well, that was a big mistake. And I had Rosa Parks as my vice president. She agreed to be the vice president. And it was major campaign. They defeated us. But to give you an example, all the older men, Rosa Parks is too old to be vice president of the NAACP in Detroit. Oh, she's too old, she's frail. Well, please, Rosa Parks was a whirlwind, but very quiet. And they went to her, you should get off the ticket. You shouldn't run with him. And she refused to do it. She refused to do it, Brian. And But see, people, this is something young people contemporary ought to know. Most people by 1965 had forgotten about Rosa Parks. I bet you can go back and C-SPAN files and hear a speech that Dr. King gave in reference to the Voting Rights Act, and in it you'll hear him say, you know, Montgomery, Alabama, long time ago, and we've almost forgotten about this woman named Rosa Parks. People would not, Rosa Parks was forced out of Alabama. That's how she ended up working for John Conyers, but couldn't get a job. And most folks had, and I'm telling you, from 1965 up until up until a point in time that folks in Detroit, there was a couple named Louise, a woman named Louise Taps, who was UAW wife and UAW husband organizer, and they took Rosa Parks when she came to Detroit under their wing. Most folks did not know, had forgotten about Rosa Parks. I know it's hard for people to understand that now, but most folks, I'm telling you, by 1965, and I really didn't realize it until, again, being in Detroit, this baptism of fire that I was going through as a young man. And these older folks would pull me aside and say, Joe, we didn't talk about Rosa Parks. We had forgotten about Rosa Parks. And then Louise Taps resurrected Rosa Parks. Louise Taps died. And then Elaine Steele took over where Louise Taps, and they resurrected Rosa Parks.
Did the Dearborn boycott work?
Oh, did it work? Yes, because it was spontaneous. Oh man, the matter of fact, the Fairlane Manor was the shopping mall, and that's what really pissed. Look, if it didn't work, Henry Ford wouldn't have picked up the phone. That's when I knew it worked. And
what was his position?
Oh, stop it! This is my town. This is Dearborn. This is Ford country. Who in the hell do you folks? Who is this Joe Madison? What? I mean, who is he? That's why he called, the folk. And Coleman Young's position was, they're trying to build the Renaissance Center, which was Ford at the time. We got these businesses, the UAW. I even had the UAW go after me. The president of, there's a big local out because of Ford factory. And the president, I was called into a meeting with him and some labor leaders, and how dare this is UAW, I forget the one or something, and this is, and you didn't get our permission, so my members are supposed to not boycott this city where they work. That's right. We can't. I don't even want them buying gas, and I want them right. All they could do is cross the street and back in Detroit. And he was a young white guy who eventually became the president of the UAW. His last name was King. But he was president of a predominantly black UAW local, and had the audacity to tell me, well, this is, you just don't know what you're doing. I said, well, the day that you turn black and get thrown out of a park, you can talk to me that way. No, I'm not calling off the boycott.
Let's go back to radio for a moment.
Okay.
What works? How do you keep an audience? You have to sell advertising. There must be a trick.
And you have to sell subscriptions.
Yeah.
On SiriusXM.
Yes.
Yeah. Here's what I was told, again, in these conversations, private conversations, personal, conversations just among, I would always ask these very successful friends of mine, what makes you successful? And we talk this way. And Aretha Frank, I'll go back to she said, Joe, there's three things that I appreciate about your show. One, you're original. Nobody does what you do. Two, you're authentic. I know it's you. I mean, that you are authentic. You're not there's no put-ons. When you're angry, you're angry. When you laugh, it's a laugh. When you're sad, we feel you. And then she said, the other thing is you're daring. And I've always remembered that. You have to be authentic, because the voice doesn't lie. You have to be original. I don't want to be like anybody else. I don't want to be like the fly jock. There's only one fly jock. I don't want to be like anybody. I have to be, and that's what Aretha used to say. Look, Joe, when you hear me, you know it's Aretha. And she would say that. You know it's me. I don't sound like Gladys. I don't sound like Diane Ross. I'm Aretha. And then you have to be daring. And that's where you either make it or get fired.
What's the most daring thing you've done since you've been at SiriusXM?
Oh, the most, going to South Sudan, Southern Sudan.
Why were you there?
Because there had been a 25-year civil war, as you well know, Darfur, South Sudan. I was a Christian organization out of Switzerland came to me and said, would you please talk about what's going on in South Sudan with women and children being taken slaves? And we can't seem to, we can't break through to the black community. And if you're willing, we'll take you to South Sudan so you can see for yourself. Now, we can't tell anybody you're going because the Sudanese government, they're at war with the rebels in Southern Sudan. It was before it was a country. And your life will be in danger. We got to be very clandestine about this. You can talk about it when you come back, but we cannot tell folks you're going. And so I decided to once again use my platform, and I went. And what I saw just brought me to tears. I mean, just hundreds, thousands of women. I was telling someone, and I went back like 6 times. And my wife went with me. Sherry went with me.
Did you go live out of there ever?
You mean broadcast
Yes.
live? No, we weren't capable. In those days, we didn't have the ability. We taped a lot. But I don't think we ever went live. But I can tell you that just to see these women and children. And here's what we did. I would come back, tell everybody, this was before George Clooney got involved with, years before he got involved. But thank God he did, because he brought that, what he used to say, that celebrity credit card with him. And I mean, we documented the horrific things that these women and children went through. A goat, and I write about this in the book, a goat costs more than a child or a woman. I think, and we documented these horror stories. I met a young girl, I don't know, 13, 14 years old, I don't remember her age, and she was forced to have a baby, because the women would be raped, and they would take care of the cattle sometimes, and she was forced to have her baby in a cattle pen. I met we had to interview a young girl who was forced to have sex with her brother while they watched, while these Sudanese folks watched. And we had to interview her away from the other villagers because she would be ostracized. And you could see the mental anguish that she had gone through. I met John Garang, who lost his life. He was sort of the George Washington of the South Sudanese movement. I thought one of the most decent men I had met in South Sudan. And I came back home and began doing two things, raising money to buy slaves. So we would raise money, transfer it into Sudanese money, which would be a, damn near a cargo carrier money, and we would buy slaves and then bring them back to their villages where they had been taken away from. I met two men whose wives had been taken slaves, and these two men actually tracked where their wives were going, and they tracked them. They got caught by the Sudanese, and their arms were chopped off after they were captured. And they, how do I put it? They couldn't, they had to have help relieving themselves. And then with that, I'm on the air. I'm talking about this. Then I decided, and this is where the title comes from, in the street, and is that we decided, fine, then we're going to hold demonstrations in front of the Sudan embassy. And every periodic at noon, to draw attention to this, to get Congress involved. You remember Donald Payne? Mm-hmm. Congressman Donald Payne was Mr. Africa.
Look, his son's there now.
His son is there now. And Donald Payne, Charlie Rango, John Lewis, Ben and Jerry, they started coming, and we would get arrested. Walter Fauntroy, we would get arrested in front of the Sudan embassy, and we'd handcuff ourselves to the door of the Sudan embassy.
Here in town?
Here in town, over on Massachusetts, little bitty embassy. And we go to jail. Then the next time we come back, and so my listeners started showing up, and while people would walk up to the door, the folks would be picketing outside. They'd handcuff themselves to the embassy. Secret Service would show up and put them in a police transport and take us to jail. And we did that for just weeks. And then, but we were able to raise enough money to, I think we calculated this, the folks from Christian Solidarity International said we probably freed over 7,000 slaves. Mm. And then it got down to, is this genocide that's going on? And trying to get the administration to declare it genocide. I think it was the Bush administration. And there was this hesitant to get Congress to declare. So Walter Fauntroy and I get summoned to the Secretary of State's office by his, what was Colonel, I can't think of his administrative assistant, was with him for years. Wilkinson. And he summons us to the State Department.
This was Colin Powell when he was Secretary of State.
This was Colin Powell. And I take it this was backtrack. Colin Powell never talked to us directly. And we've been watching what you're doing, and in essence, keep doing it. Just keep doing it. Okay, all right. So I'm assuming that was direction. See, the two of us know how there's a lot of back channeling that goes on in Washington. So we kept demonstrating, kept doing this, and then Colin Powell declared it was genocide that was going on in southern Sudan. Fast forward, the southern Sudan becomes a country, youngest country on the continent of Africa. I get invited to the flag raising. What an event! I've never been to one. What an experience! Here's all the world leaders, this new country, all this promise, and so we're at this event, and and I'm recording different people to bring back to the show. And Colin Powell's inside, doing whatever reception. I said, I wonder if I can get Colin Powell to come out and do an interview. And so, my wife, executive producer, goes in, and brings Colin Powell out. He comes outside. And, oh yeah, Joe Mass? Yeah. And there's a photograph, and there's just this expression between the two of them. And he says, Joe, now I want you to tell everybody, I was the first to call it genocide. Now you tell your audience that. And we have that recording.
In your book, you tell us a lot about your health problems.
Yeah.
Prostate cancer,
weight,
diabetes. I remember you spoke to a bunch of students that we had. You were 275 pounds.
I was almost 300 pounds, that's right. Yeah.
You're now 180?
Oh, about 179, 180. Yeah. I'm half the person I was. Yeah.
And what did I miss in your health? Because you tell us all this in the book.
Well, what happened was our radio doctor, Dr. Gabe Merkin, was on radio for years here at WRC. So he was our primary physician. My wife and I's primary physician. She was going for an examination. He just came out to say hello. That's all. And he looked at me. And he said, you're not leaving here until I give you a physical. And I can tell you now, before we get the results, I guarantee you got high blood pressure, you got type 2 diabetes, and a bunch of comorbidities. And so I go in the back, blood test, pressure, data, you name it, he does the whole 9 yards. And then he tells me, he says, now, I don't care how you do it, but if you don't get that weight off of you, you're going to drop dead, and nobody will know why. So I don't care how you do it, but that's what's going to happen.
What year would this have been?
Oh, I can't remember. I'm terrible.
20 years ago?
Oh, no, not that long ago. I don't think so. And I know we sort of pass each other all the time, but I just don't remember. I'd have to look and think about it. My wife is very good at she knows those dates. And so he said that, and the problem is it's environmental. What does that mean? I'm thinking environmental trees, that kind of. He says, no, you're doing it to yourself. You're doing it to yourself. And so I decided, Jesse Jackson Jr., if you remember, was very overweight too. And he got surgery. So I went to him and asked him what kind of surgery. And so it was a duodenal switch, which was something I had learned, and again, because I have the show, I could bring all these doctors in, and I was really doing it for myself, but my audience was learning too. And that's when I decided to have weight loss surgery. But what a lot of people don't know, you have to go through all these tests, sleep apnea. You have to take what's your, are you do you love sweets? Do you love meat? And then you have to go through effort to lose weight. They just don't automatically do it. And here was the other issue. And again, I used the show. Insurance companies wouldn't pay for my procedure.
This is not lap band.
Oh no, because lap band, I knew that wasn't going to work. No, because they had all these different. This was reducing the size of your stomach, reducing the size of. Please don't get me going through all this medical stuff, but reducing shortening the intestines, so that you don't absorb calories. But it worked for me. So I went through the procedure. The fight was to get the insurance companies to pay for it.
How'd you get it done?
Oh, raising holy hell. You keep talking about why do I raise hell on the radio? I mean, matter of fact, my wife raised more hell than I did. She was the one who was getting ready to pick it.
This was Aetna?
Yes. This was Aetna. And they weren't going to do it. Got the doctors involved. Kathy, I was with Radio 1. Kathy Hughes got involved. And we had to fight. I mean, really fight. We finally got them to agree, and then Medicare agreed. Now, once Medicare and Aetna, Medicare agreed, then the insurance companies agreed.
Were you 65?
I don't know.
I mean, how did Medicare's you have to be 65?
Yeah, but there were other people who, I mean, I was not doing this just.
I see what you're saying. Medicare agreed to do other people.
Right. I mean, this wasn't just for me. I mean, there were at this. I mean, I was fighting for a bunch of folk who were calling and saying, "Oh man, they turned me down too, Mr. Madison." And we were on the radio talking to these people, and damn that Aetna and darn it, and it was, and again, radio activism. And then eventually it turned.
How fast did you lose weight?
Let me tell you that here's what happened. After my procedure, the doctor came in and said, "Okay, you are now diabetes free. You will never have diabetes again. Your blood pressure is normalizing. It's not a magic bullet. You can pretty much eat what you want, but you got to be reasonable." So I went from 275, 79 pounds down to, I weighed I lost the same. I got down to the same weight I was when I was a high school football player. I have a photograph, and then Ebony magazine did a feature because the editor of Ebony went through weight loss procedure. And I know Jesse Jackson's sister went through a weight loss.
Jesse Jackson Jr.
And Jesse Jackson's daughter. But his sister went through. She was having serious problems, and with weight too. But they did that thing, and Muhammad Ali's daughter. And there's an Ebony magazine article about all of us and this whole what was the best procedure for African Americans and that type of thing. I have this photograph that the Ebony photographer took, and Dick Gregory taught me this. He said, get one wardrobe, one jacket or pair of pants when you were your heaviest, and keep it in the closet to always remind you, Brian, of your weight. And there's this photograph of a tuxedo jacket where Sherry was pressed against me, and I could literally button the tuxedo jacket with the two of us in it.
We got to wrap this up, and the last question
really?
for you. Yeah, I know. What's the main thing that you want your listeners, people who know you, to remember about you?
Not where I started. Not that 2-year-old that was abandoned by a mother or a father, because I don't know why. It's not where you start. I write in the book how I would spend my summers, because my grandfather was a trash hauler. Today he would be in waste management, and if I was smart, I would have gotten in that business. Yeah, we called in those days a dump master. And in those days we called it a dump, but it was today it's a landfill. I'd spend my summers. People don't know that, watching, seeing me on TV, that I would spend my summers on a dump, pulling out rags, metal, paper, and that's how we made money to survive and live. We didn't talk about surviving. I mean, I never really thought I was poor because everybody around us was was working in a factory or doing the same thing. That I went from working as a young teenager or a kid on a dump to ending up interviewing the first African American president of the United States in the Oval Office at his request. So it's not where you start, it's the journey. And that's why I wrote the book, and that I'm, when they hear me, that first of all I'm original, I'm authentic, and yeah, I've hung around a lot of people that have been far more daring than I have.
The name of the book is Radioactive, a memoir of advocacy and action on the air and in the streets. Joe Madison can be found on SiriusXM Radio channel
126, Urban View channel. It's Urban View. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe Madison.
No, man, we have been friends for so. This is the two Midwesterners. We always laugh about that, but you've been. I say this sincerely in closing. I consider you an original, and look what you've done with C-SPAN. Nobody's ever. How dare you put C-SPAN together?
Joe, thanks.
And you're authentic.
It's not about me. It's about you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Love you much.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We would love to hear from you. You can email us at podcasts@c-span.org.